The space station IGRI 1121, 2:57 p.m. Galactic Standard Time. Quinn Brina Cruis's path into the escape shuttle bay is blocked by the unmechhed, pure white-furred Nimish woman who had previously torn her from Null's cockpit and blasted Null away in her weird mech, and a strange hologram is also rushing towards her. Quinn resolves herself and makes a few testing lunges at the Nimish woman with her spear. The woman sneers and weaves effortlessly away from Quinn's attempted strikes before snorting in derision when Quinn turns and destroys the hologram with a single strike. "Is that my daughter?" General Vadim Riesling's voice calls out from the confines of the escape shuttle bay. "Permit her entry." The Nimish woman flicks an ear and steps back, permitting Quinn entry. As Quinn enters, she witnesses Vadim pulling the man who just readied his escape pod away from it with one hand, crushing his skull with the force of his grip, and casting him aside. "There you are, Quintessence." "Dad, please stop. There's still time to stop." "So you don't intend to fight me?" Beyond that, Vadim doesn't even react to her words, and doesn't even bother to look at her. "Bring her, then," he says to the Nimish. The Nimish's tail flicks, and she scowls. Her distorted voice asks,
"How many pieces?"
Vadim simply replies, "Intact," as he begins to move to step into the escape pod. But just as he opens the pod, a blast from outside blows a hole into the room, and neither Vadim nor the Nimish woman flinch, but Quinn does. And the Nimish woman sneers again at Quinn's flinching. Quinn recovers, and then turns to face her and brandishes her spear. The Nimish woman rolls her eyes.
"You think you have a chance against me, you spoiled Maratin-rich girl? You barely know which way to hold that thing."
As Quinn strikes forward at her, Bryn bursts into the room in his mech and begins to open fire on Vadim, and the Nimish woman evades Quinn's strike with ease and then activates her rocket boots to kick Quinn through 2 walls and into an adjacent room. Quinn, with most of the damage insulated by her heavy pilot armor, still groans and has to struggle to get back to her feet. The Nimish woman just watches her with clear contempt as she recollects her spear and retakes her fighting stance.
"You still believe you can fight me? You're nothing but a pathetic bourgeoisie brat, plain pretend revolutionary."
"Who are you?" The Nimish woman sighs and unsheathes her katana, and then she traces a single clawed finger up the side, which lights the blade up with crackling electricity. As she assumes a fighting stance, she taps a single button on her light combat armor's left arm to start up a song from her integrated sound system. The sounds of gunfire ring out behind them as the Nimish woman strikes out at Quinn with a ruthless, calculated precision, carving her electric-charged nanoblade right into the AI translator system of Quinn's pilot armor, utterly destroying her ability to understand languages outside her native tongue, and then kicking her away. Quinn attempts to fight back desperately, but she's clearly completely outclassed by this vicious Nimish assailant, who stops playing around only when Bryn bursts into the room and cleanly carves right through Quinn's pilot armor to slash deeply across her chest and also shock her with the electricity, sending her slamming against the far wall. and slumping to the ground. The Nimish then turns to face Quinn's reinforcements with a sneer and draws the visor from her helmet down over her eyes to shield them. She takes a stance and slices down Bryn's barrage of gunfire with an augmented reaction speed and strength. But, being harried by the reinforcements of Quinn's found family, and hearing the additional reinforcements beginning to arrive, including Quinn's mech Null, who must have just finished destroying her AI-controlled mech elsewhere in the station, the Nimish begins to cautiously withdraw, only to be stabbed very ineptly in the side with a spear by the pampered girl she'd assumed she'd taken out of the fight completely. She couldn't not look at her then, her eyes widening with surprise before narrowing with outrage. The spoiled girl was much more resilient than she anticipated. As Quinn began to grasp out for her neck, the Nimish woman quickly shoved the girl away with scorn, and then turned and rushed towards the far wall, slicing out the glass with one strike and escaping into space just as Null and the rest of Quinn's found family break into the room. Quinn manages to garble out, "I didn't think she would just strike me. Why? Why would a Nimish?" before collapsing from blood loss. Bryn quickly patches her up, and Null takes Quinn into her arms and looks after the retreating Nimish woman before rushing her companion back to the Aetolith for more serious care. Time passes, and as the dust settles and the Hex Girls retrieve what data they can from the IGRI-1121 before blowing it up, Null, who is also merged with Quinn's wife Hafsa, sits tensely in the recovery room as the Aetolith's medic patches Quinn up. And while the Hex Girls repair and rearm their mechs and recover themselves on the way to the Flavor Town, Quinn begins to drag herself out of bed before she's fully recovered. This causes Null to rise up in protest and gently but firmly press her back down into the bed. In that moment, there is a tense, charged energy in that act that's shared between them, and that draws Quinn's gaze to Null's faceplate. She looks into her eyes searchingly again. Why? Why is this so familiar? She reaches up to touch Null's face, but hesitates, and she aches inside. Null. Null quickly releases Quinn and draws back. I'm sorry. Quinn touches one of her shoulders with her other hand, and a distant expression settles onto her features. The whole within her howls and throbs, and she closes her eyes and visibly swallows as she draws her hand away from that shoulder to instead clutch the dog tags she wears around her neck in her fist tightly. Quinn draws in a breath and steadies herself, renewing her resolve before opening her eyes and looking back to Null to speak to her. Null, I need to train more. I need to get better with the spear. Null's animated expression frowns slightly, but she nods in acceptance. As soon as you are in fighting condition, we can boot up the training program in the Matchmaker, and I will train you as often as you require. You promise? Null's expression blanks momentarily, the display on her faceplate going dark. When it returns, she is smiling fondly, and her voice is strained. I promise. Hafsa's heart aches as she speaks the familiar words. End scene.